Do it.
Do it!
Do it.
Do it.
Do it.
Hello and welcome back to the channel, everyone. It's your pal Nomz here, and today we are talking more Cyberpunk 2077, and we will be deconstructing a review by Under the Mayo. No, wait, sorry. It's not a review. I apologize, but, no, yeah, it's kind of a review. Anyway, look, he's an excellent Doom guide, pun very much intended, and I genuinely like him as an individual and most of his videos, but that said, this video of his really frustrated me. I saw he was getting a bunch of things either wrong or was just plain old making no sense. That's not to say I entirely disagree with him and what he has to say here, but well, you'll see. Just a quick warning. I've purchased Cyberpunk 2077 on PC, but I don't have a good PC build. It's actually a laptop, being perfectly honest, so I've actually had to outsource some help to get decent footage for this video. So I want to thank A British Potato for assisting me with the audio editing of this video and for providing some of his own gameplay for footage. He actually made his own response to this very same video we're going to talk about, so you can find his channel below if you're curious. Link in the description. Right, now thanks for being patient. Let's get started on Under the Mayo's not review of Cyberpunk 2077 and let's see where we land.
Shall we?
I can't do a full review of Cyberpunk 1997. It's filled with so many things I just don't personally enjoy. I don't like cover-based shooting, or constant long drawn-out dialogue sections, or big worlds of running around doing whatever, or looter-shooter mechanics of inventories full of duplicates of guns. It's very hard for me to enjoy those things.
Okay, that's fair enough. Why'd you make a Cyberpunk video then? I understand for monetary reasons, sure, I can respect that, but couldn't a community post, or tweets maybe, have sufficed? Why would you play presumably 30 hours of a game that you know is a genre you don't like just to make a video you aren't thrilled about making? For instance, I'm working on a video about The Mandalorian explaining why it's a terrible show for my primary channel. Now, I do have a very heavy investment in Star Wars, but I'm so sick of The Mandalorian at this point and its fanatics, and as well as the shit taste that television show left in my mouth, that honestly I doubt I'll ever finish that video, because why would I want to continue working on something I hate? You know what, maybe I should just take my own advice on that one. Anyway, carry on.
So if I come here saying it's bad just because I don't like it, I don't think that's fair. That's why I'm never going to do a video about Dark Souls on this channel. I don't like Dark Souls because it's full of stuff I don't like. I would never call Dark Souls a bad game, I just don't enjoy it. We can't all enjoy everything, and I rarely want to declare that a game is straight up bad unless it's something like Alien Isolation.
Motherfucker!
But I know that Cyberpunk is one of the biggest games of our generation, and I'm gonna get asked what I think about it for months, so I gotta say something. This is not a review. If you want an in-depth review, I'm actually gonna do the unthinkable and recommend SkillUp. His review goes over the whole game pretty well, showcasing its positives and its flaws. If that's what you want, you can get it there.
Yep, go check out SkillUp. Shout out to him for saying in a spoiler-free review that The Last of Us Part 2 was the equivalent of the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Not only ensuring that I never bought the game, but giving Naughty Dog the subtlest middle finger about the true quality of their game without breaking any of the early review embargo rules. What a legend.
First, I'll admit that I'm not a fan of the Witcher series. I'm not into the world of those games or the combat system, and I'm not a big fan of open world games in general.
What you say is heresy, is it?
I have my exceptions, specifically the classic GTA games and Red Dead Redemption. I'm not fundamentally opposed to games with a lot of story and dialogue as their priority either, but it's difficult to find games that I feel do it right.
I would skin you alive for that frame rate. Cyberpunk is fucking gorgeous, one of my favorite aesthetical games of all time, and I can't enjoy it on my current build at more than 1080p 30 frames per second. You, my friend, are spoiled. You are spoiled, you are.
Or at least do it in a way that keeps me interested. I don't know where to start, so I'll start with the beginning. The first hour of the game is incredibly slow. It takes 45 minutes for something to actually happen, and that something is a short gunfight. The game takes a very long time to get started. Hours, actually. It was over 6 hours for me to reach the end of the prologue. I don't mind the length necessarily, but I'm already kind of bored of the world.
First off, how are you already bored of the world? Since you can't even explore the majority of it until after the prologue where the game actually truly opens up, giving you essentially the freedom to choose what you want to do and explore wherever you want. Secondly, yeah, it's no wonder why you don't enjoy The Witcher. If you think Cyberpunk is slow and heavy on the dialogue, The Witcher might just actually kill you. Because, oh, here comes the dialogue, mountains of it. It just so happens that Cyberpunk and The Witcher's dialogue is extremely well written and keeps the player invested from start to finish, since they are both story-driven games. The Witcher 3 was never known for its gameplay. It's not terrible gameplay, but its world, its atmosphere, and its story are why most people play it, which is exactly why people play Cyberpunk, myself included. Although the gameplay in Cyberpunk actually blows The Witchers out of the water. Yeah, I said it. Sounds to me like you weren't really paying attention. You were just chomping at the bit for the first gunfight. You've made it no secret on YouTube just how much you love Doom Eternal. And that game is essentially a 160-second cutscene, then boom, here's your shotgun, go shoot. Sounds to me like you went into this game just hoping for something different, or you knew what you were getting yourself into and decided to play it anyway. Cyberpunk's opening prologue is not the problem here.
The art style is definitely beautiful, and the city is well designed. It's just that every store, every business, every apartment, inside and out, uses the same color palette. They all have the same neon colored lights. This is an issue I have with the general idea of cyberpunk. A punk rock kid stands out in a crowd. When everyone and everything is punk rock, it stops being cool and instead becomes commonplace and you get numb to it.
That's almost like it's the whole point of Cyberpunk's aesthetic. And actually, no. Night City actually has a range of diverse locations to explore, and that look different, because they're governed by different gangs and different cultures. For example, Kabuki is a very neon-like-esque, heavy punk rock atmosphere about it. That's where Afterlife is, one of the core locations of the game. But you also have Japantown, which takes its color and design inspirations from Asian culture. There's also the Badlands outside of the city, which is mostly desert and has a very Mad Max Borderlands kind of vibe to it. There's also the city center, which is the corporate district, which looks much more professional and much cleaner compared to the rest of the city. I could go on, but no, the city uses different color palettes for different areas. But the city itself, Cyberpunk as a whole in fact, has the core theme and aesthetic of neon-esque punk rock art style, or whatever you want to call it.
Moving on to the RPG mechanics, the skill tree offers some good upgrades, and some meh upgrades. I wanted to invest in some cool hacking skills and weapon damage, but Cyberpunk locks off basic gameplay mechanics that should be available at the start. You can't sprint while reloading, which is a basic user-friendly mechanic that adds to the smoothness of combat. There's no reason to lock this away.
Except for the fact that, you know, it's an RPG. Cyberpunk isn't the greatest RPG, but it certainly possesses some heavy RPG elements, one of which being your skill tree. Not all of the perks are worth investing in, but the amount of choice you get and how you choose to build your character V does add to the game and its experience, and makes every playthrough feel unique, allowing players to customize based on the playstyle they want. It also adds trial and error and consequences of choice when you realize, oh damn, I should have used more skill and perk points for this category because I want that build. Because I want a build that's more run and gun as opposed to sneak and stealth killing. Since you're a massive Doom fan, it makes sense to me at least why you'd want the run and gun type of build. And I know you're not a fan of reloading in general, a mechanic that is completely absent from Doom, but Cyberpunk is not Doom Eternal. Cyberpunk is an RPG action-adventure FPS game, and it's not uncommon for a player in these kinds of games to earn these basic mechanics. You're meant to start out weak and helpless and eventually progress, grow stronger and gain the build you want. Yeah, sprint is a base mechanic. Reload is a base mechanic. Combining the two is more complex. So that's a perk that you earn, combining two base mechanics, because this advantage may not fit the playstyle that you want. Hell, double jump could be considered a base mechanic, and you have to buy cyberware in order to get it. Is it poor game design for an RPG? No. No, it is not.
Just the fact that you can change it with perk points is an acknowledgement that this sucks. It's not an upgrade. Damage modifiers, health regeneration, stamina boost, hacking skills, these are upgrades. Unlocking the ability to run while in combat is simply a way to make things less annoying.
You can run in combat though, you just can't run and reload. As an RPG shooter, there is more than one way to play this game. For example, you could only choose one type of gun and max out those perks to make reloading incredibly quick, so it doesn't hinder your combat as much. Hell, how often do you find yourself running and gunning with a sniper rifle? You can also focus solely on evasion and blade skills and hacking, allowing you to paralyze your opponents. Use the dodge skill to evade incoming projectiles to get in close and decapitate them with a katana. You can invest in stealth and hacking, allowing you to get one-shot headshots with pistols while undetected, or hack multiple enemies at once. Hell, you can even cause some to commit suicide, or hacking turrets, turning their own technology against them. Or if you want to run and gun, just put all your points into the body attribute to unlock sprinting and reloading.
It's a problem that the game created for itself that you have to resolve by spending points. I don't hold the opinion that any possible thing being locked away can be justified by saying, well, it's an RPG. There's a line. Can you imagine if for the first hours of the game you couldn't run more than 4 seconds without your stamina depleting? That would be really annoying, right?
No, Cyberpunk didn't cross any line. You can be just fine without sprinting and reloading, and it just makes it that much more satisfying when you do unlock it, because guess what? You earned that perk. That's how RPGs work. And near as I can tell, Cyberpunk gives you unlimited sprint anyway. You just don't have the strength and dexterity and skill to use sprinting and reloading effectively in combat until you work up your build. Projekt wants players to have the most basic build at the start so that the player is encouraged to try all avenues of play before committing to a build. That's also how the prologue is designed, to show players what combat scenarios to expect, so they can decide how to progress. That's why you're forced into balls-out gunfights and also stealth and hacking sections at the start.
Would it then be excusable if you could eventually unlock the ability to run longer? No, it wouldn't. That's a bullshit restriction they put on the player that they charge you to remove.
No, actually, bullshit. Unlimited sprint would have also been an interesting perk to unlock, and I can tell you straight up, I've played several games that have used that perk as an unlockable. I'm guessing CD Projekt Red didn't add it into Cyberpunk because sprinting in most instances wasn't tied to the combat. Instead, it's more used for traversing the city. Sprinting and reloading, however, is tied to the combat and makes you a far more effective gunfighter for a very specific build type. That is all part of the RPG progression. You don't start this RPG with double jump, sprint and reload, or aerial assassinations because this is an RPG. This is not strictly a run and gun shooter like Doom Eternal. I'm sorry if that's what you were looking for, but that is not Cyberpunk's fault. And criticizing the skill tree for locking combat mechanics to further distinguish itself in an RPG shooter is quite frankly ridiculous and nonsensical.
I feel the same way about sprinting and reloading during shooting combat. If this were something you could unlock from the beginning, it wouldn't be a problem, but you have to raise your body skill level to 11 to be able to unlock it, which takes hours. So while I would like to have spent points on cool upgrades and abilities, instead I had to spend the first 6 hours of this game getting enough skill points to raise my skill level on the body category to then be able to spend the perk points on the ability to sprint while reloading. Unbelievable, unacceptable. A little less Destiny please, and a little more Prey.
That doesn't say all we need to know about what you were wanting from this game, but sadly did not get. I don't know what does. You wanted this to be a run and gun shooter. That's all you were interested in by the sounds of it. That's why you paid no attention to the dialogue. That's why you were probably banging your head against the wall, praying for the first shooting section to show up. And honestly, I don't buy it for a moment. I think the only skill tree you were interested in was the body skill tree, because you only wanted to use one playstyle and you were pissed off it was something you had to work for. Unlike in Doom Eternal, for instance, where you get just about every base mechanic within the first hour of play. And you don't really need to earn anything in that game, at least from a mechanical standpoint, because the combat loop in Doom Eternal is solely based around moving fast, knowing your enemy's strengths and weaknesses, and using your weapon arsenal and the map to your advantage. And that's nothing against the game either. That's just how it's meant to be played. Just like Cyberpunk is meant to be played in many different ways to cater to the player's style through RPG progression. Hating Cyberpunk for doing essentially exactly what RPGs do is idiotic. Like, I'm not going to hate Doom Eternal for lacking heavy dialogue to make sense for what the hell is happening on screen, because the game doesn't sell itself as a heavy story-focused game anyway. It's shoot first, ask questions later. Halo, on the other hand, does sell itself as both a sci-fi action-adventure shooter and a heavily story-focused game, which is why people, myself included, were very pissed off when Halo 5 made no narrative sense at all. Have I made my point yet? Essentially, hating a game for the core foundation for which it is based on and sells itself on is not the game's fault. It's the game's fault if it fails to meet the standard the game set for itself design-wise.
It's actually depressing to be 15 hours into this game and then see an upgrade you want like increased damage to headshots by 50% and then realize you'll have to level up that category from level 4 to 11 before you can buy it, which will take what, another 4 hours?
That's because it's an RPG progression system. I can't spell it out any clearer than that. And Cyberpunk's a long game, with plenty of ample opportunity to unlock these skills and put them to use. Hell, trial and error is a part of the game, and its replayability. You could go back into the character creator on your second playthrough, max out body and cool, and earn the rest of the progression in-game, and you'll have a massive shortcut that way.
And that's if I'm not investing in any other categories during that time. The progression is so slow and incremental that it's hard to get excited about purchasing upgrades. The combat in this game is mediocre at best. I don't think the guns feel very satisfying. They're like lesser Borderlands guns. Enemies don't always react to being shot. Enemies will take 6 or 7 direct shots to the head and be fine, and then they'll shoot you once and leave you dying.
Yeah, this is an RPG, and I've heard people complain about the enemies being damage sponges, but again, that's entirely the point of the game, upgrading yourself and your arsenal until you're strong enough to take on certain missions and gang members. While I'll admit it's a bit silly for some enemies that are higher level than you to be able to take several shots to the head before dying, there's a reason why this is in place. As an RPG, if everything could be one-shotted to the head, that would essentially break the game. Though I think CD Projekt Red could have found some middle ground here. For example, maybe certain enemies could have had sturdy helmets, and depending on the enemy's level, it could take several headshots to knock the helmet off before you can finish him with a headshot. But again, because this is an RPG where level scaling keeps the game progressing at the pace that it's meant to, it's really a non-issue.
You can mitigate these issues with eventual upgrades and combinations of hacking skills and stacks that multiply damage, defense, speed, but it certainly doesn't do the early game any favors. You can't raise the field of view above 100, which is pretty crap. There also seems to be an issue with the input buffering where sometimes you'll be pressing a grenade or switching weapons and the command just doesn't respond, which is something that can get you killed.
Yep, I'll agree with that. The input lag certainly is a technical problem with Cyberpunk, which is just another cherry on the shit cake of Cyberpunk's technical disaster of a launch, but I don't think that input lag is part of the overall game design. If it is, then someone at CD Projekt Red needs to get the sack.
To complement these bad aspects of combat is the bad AI. Worse than Titanfall 2 AI. Enemies that just stand there like morons. Laughably stupid enemies. Stupid enemies that aren't fun to fight. Seriously, some of the combat encounters in this game are downright embarrassing. But it's cover-based shooting, so what can you really expect?
Well, first off, fuck you. Halo Combat Evolved, Halo Reach, and Halo 4 as well have great enemy AI, as well as many other cover-based shooters. However, in regards to Cyberpunk, I disagree. I certainly admit that the peripheral AI is bugged to shit. The nameless NPCs that are relatively inconsequential anyway. And even still, you get GTA fanboys like these guys hopping on the anti-Cyberpunk bandwagon and treating this bullshit, this blink and you miss it shit, as the deciding factor for a game's quality, when it could not matter less regarding a game's substance, i.e. its story, its gameplay, its progression, and its side content. For which Cyberpunk takes a gigantic steaming dump on GTA 5 with its 8 years of updates. But as for the enemy AI, the combative AI, I disagree. In this cover-based shooter, I found that when the enemy AI, on hard difficulty anyway, works the way it's meant to, it's actually quite good. The enemies will take up different positions that are most optimal for their weapons. Some will lob grenades at you to flush you out of cover, and some enemies with close quarter weaponry, like shotguns, SMGs, and katana, will actually fan out and try to flank you and close the distance. But that's when the AI is working. When you find the AI crouching or refusing to move or just remaining stationary in a very exposed line of sight, or they're just refusing to outright react, which also happens in some stealth encounters, admittedly, I found that when this happens, that the AI is simply bugging out and not performing the way it's meant to. So I think the more accurate criticism of the game's enemy AI is that it's inconsistent. Not bad outright, but just inconsistent. I'll happily die on the hill when the AI works, it actually works well.
You'll probably have more fun if you go the stealth route. Combat isn't the main focus of Cyberpunk, obviously. If it were, it would be a much bigger problem.
I disagree. I'd say combat is about a quarter to a third of the game. Again, in The Witcher 3, you're a monster hunter, but the combat wasn't fantastic either. But at the same time, it was a game that was carried by many other things. I wouldn't expect a game like The Witcher 3 that focuses on many things on such a grand scale to be as excellent in the gameplay department as something like Halo, Doom Eternal, Dark Souls, or Sekiro. Because those games place far more of an emphasis on the gameplay than, say, an open world, side quests, economy, loot, upgrades, and customization, etc., etc. And again, that's aside from the fact that the gameplay in Cyberpunk shines more and more the further you progress and the more you upgrade your character.
This is a game about being in Night City, driving around and immersing yourself in this world, steering cars that all control awkwardly, running over civilians and alerting the police just for the police to totally forget about you within seconds. Very immersive stuff.
Yeah, go fuck yourself. Sure, the wanted system is awful, probably the worst thing about Cyberpunk, that screams of a rush job at the end of the developer's crunch time. It feels unfinished, and I'm pretty sure earlier in the game itself it advertised a completely different wanted system that involved the police hiring a mercenary to track you down. Obviously, that's not what we got. Yet, anyway. But again, no one defends this, and for someone who was just earlier complaining about not being able to play the game the way you wanted, the one upside to this is that, at the very least, the wanted system doesn't intrude on your game. So while it's annoying and can be hilariously immersion-breaking at the same time, it doesn't completely fuck up your game. Like in GTA, when you have to go on a wild goose chase just to lose the cops, but at the same time, that's the entire premise of GTA, so it's not something I would say is wrong with that game. Just like I wouldn't throw a tantrum about having to unlock combat mechanics in an RPG. So you're not exactly wrong, Mayo, but it strikes me as odd that you're the one complaining about the lack of a wanted system disrupting your game. But before you go on your cherry-picking spree of pointing out immersion-breaking bugs to cater to the angry mob online, I'll tell you just how immersive Cyberpunk can be when it comes to the stuff that actually fucking matters. Allow me to go onto a small rant to debunk all of the cherry-picking pseudos out there, using clips of peripheral inconsequential bullshit to discredit the game's immersion quality. Night City is easily one of the most detailed game environments I've ever played. Not only does the design of the city actually make sense from a practical standpoint, but how well the game exhibits the personality of what Night City is at its core really shines. From the exquisite detail on the walls and floors of just random corridors in a nameless building, or the graffiti on the streets that represent the controlling factions of that territory. Hell, sometimes you even come across police shootouts in progress with warring gang members, as well as the billboards and news shows and advertisements representing in-game products, some of which are hilarious and some of which you can actually purchase. As well as all the unique faction-defining locations across the city, you can even visit all these unique bars and eateries that look and feel very distinct from one another. The city itself is so dense and packed with stuff to do and stuff to find that one time I accidentally drove off a bridge and landed in a water ditch where I found another driver who had actually killed himself by losing control of his car after a drunken breakup with his girlfriend. And I found his car submerged with a shard that showed me the conversation between the two of them, as well as discovering some nice loot for myself. And not to mention all of the locations that possess excellent side characters that you meet along the way, some of which being the fixers that will call you up when you're close to a job and give you a full description of what the job is before you can take it. Or hell, just stumbling into a job all on your own and just rolling with it. And all of these elements come together to make the city feel alive, and no amount of GTA has better peripheral NPCs can change that, or dream of competing with Night City's detail. Except in the most inconsequential areas, which I guess is the only edge GTA has over Cyberpunk, but oh well, I guess the GTA fanboys and their bandwagon mob can grasp at their straws, as can you, Mayo. And let me make this clear as well, there are certainly substantial criticisms you can make against Cyberpunk. I certainly have some myself, and the wanted system is definitely one of them, but aside from the peripheral NPC AI and bugs, and more bugs, so far all I've seen is people criticizing the game for what it isn't instead of criticizing the game for what it is. See this absolutely genius tweet from the Act Man, which really disappointed me. One of my biggest problems with Cyberpunk is that it has absolutely no enemy variety, just a bunch of dudes with guns. The Witcher 3 had an entire bestiary dedicated to the enemy types you'd encounter. You can see my comment below, and I stand by that. Actman's doing pretty much exactly what a lot of people are doing, criticizing the game for something it was never trying to be, as a means of following the crowd. See this brilliant follow-up Actman made to his argument about robot lizards, or some wacky made-up bullshit being as part of the Cyberpunk enemy variety, whether or not it breaks law or not. Setting aside the fact that Actman is wrong and that Cyberpunk actually does have some enemy variety as well as boss fights, Actman obviously doesn't seem to give a shit about lore, does he? Although in the case of Mayo, however, he is criticizing the game for what it is, he's just doing a terrible fucking job of it. I.e. too much dialogue in a story-driven game, and why do I have to unlock this mechanic in an RPG? Anyway, let's move on.
Night City, for as beautifully designed as it is populated by the most miserable, insufferable assholes since the Ghostbusters remake. Everyone here is scowling, staring angrily, cursing, arguing. It's just depressing. I don't enjoy being in this place or talking to anyone, be they store owners, side characters, or people in the main quest. They're all one-dimensional, ultra-serious, and always trying to talk real cool, man.
Do you know a guy called Cosmonaut Variety Hour? Because I'm starting to think you guys would get along greatly. This is possibly the worst criticism you've levied against Cyberpunk so far, and I gotta say, you simply don't get it. The world of Cyberpunk, Night City, isn't a very nice place to live. It's in fact a miserable place to live for many people. So many people living below the poverty line. So many people addicted to drugs and cyberware. So many people living in fear of the gangs. So many hard-working people trying to make a living under the crushing foot of the corporate society that preys on the weak and the poor. So much injustice transpires without consequence in a city that's infested with corruption, including its very own law enforcement. Cyberpunk is all about you, a lone mercenary in this very bleak environment trying to survive and come up in the world to make a name for themselves and make money, and through the midst of all of that, there is a compelling story, as well as many other compelling stories. You'd know this if you paid attention in the prologue. And you say that the characters are one-dimensional. I think any of us that's played Cyberpunk for longer than the prologue is gonna call straight bullshit on that, mate. The side characters, their depth and intrigue, as well as their quest lines, is arguably the best part of the game. And what also helps to add to the immersion factor of Cyberpunk, you actually meet these characters and interact with them, and they have their own backstories and have their own lives in the game and their own work routines. One of them even works at the Afterlife, but also owns her own mechanical shop, and you can find her at the Afterlife on a regular basis. These are actual characters with actual depth and purpose in the game, not random peripheral NPCs who have no names, who you don't interact with other than glancing at them while you're passing through.
My character V was always quite the prick, with his discount Batman voice and I'm the baddest mofo around attitude. I hated listening to him talk, and you'll be talking a lot. This game is full of talking, which is fine. I get that this is an action-light, story-based RPG. I'm down for an experience of talking to characters and interacting with a story. The problem is that everyone you talk to is so drab and dull and one note, and so many of these conversations go on with dialogue choices that largely feel arbitrary and meaningless. It's not clear at all how some of these yellow choices might or might not affect something because so many are generally worded in the same attitude.
Well, I don't know what to tell you, dude. This is the game. It's what the game was always going to be, and what the game was sold on. If you don't like this aspect, it really isn't for you, is it? Also, bullshit. The dialogue options do have an impact on your predicaments and choices. And it's clearly specified for you. For example, blue is more exposition if you choose to want to learn more, and it's beneficial for you so you can make an even more informed decision. The yellow highlighted dialogue is story progression, and multiple yellow options means lots of choices. You'll see the impact these choices have on certain characters during the main quests, and mostly in side quests. Now, obviously, this isn't every conversation, but anyone who's played the game knows exactly when a crucial choice is about to be made.
Which leads me to the worst part of this game, the nagging characters. In a game where your choices are supposed to influence the story and relationships between characters, you'd think the game would want to encourage you to think about your decisions. However, any character you talk to starts harassing you if you take more than 5 seconds to think about what you want to say. Every time I had 3 or 4 choices presented to me, I'd think, okay, let's see what these say and how they might impact things. And as I'm reading option 3, the character is yelling at me to hurry up and answer them. This happens over and over and over and over and over, to the point where I just said, fuck it, fine, I'll just press F to say the first dialogue choice to shut you up.
Yeah, I agree, it's annoying and could maybe be tweaked or completely removed from the game, but acting like it's the worst part of the game is asinine. Let's be completely honest here. Don't sound off on this one minute detail like you're a tycoon that just struck oil.
Okay, yeah, F.
Just answered your own question about where Evelyn is. Long gone.
God, I hate V.
Why do you believe she could help you remove the chip? Does a corporation help her?
No idea. Think so, yeah. Don't think so, no. And asking too many questions. Okay.
V?
Shut up! Give me 5 seconds to read the dialogue options. Fine, just F, whatever.
Yeah, that really does go to show your lack of investment in this topic, and to show your intent with this video. You're not reviewing Cyberpunk, you're just going out of your way to hyperbole bitch about relatively inconsequential shit and act like it's the end of the world. Or just simple mechanics that this story-driven RPG action-adventure open-world shooter is based on. Because it simply isn't for you, but you're trying to misrepresent it negatively at every turn.
It's the most stunning case of a game sabotaging itself that I've ever seen. Like if you were playing Contra, but every time you shoot your gun, it explodes in your face and you die. How the hell do you make a game where you want the player to consider the effects of their dialogue options, but also nag them constantly for taking a few seconds to read the options and think about them? It's stunning that this design decision made it past the first phase of testing. Man, I want to do something today.
Sure, man. What do you want to do? Want to go to the movies? Maybe get some food? We can call a friend and play some games?
Well, maybe
Mayo, can you answer me?
Sorry, fine. A movie, yeah?
Nice. Well, according to the website, the next showings are for Jackson's Revenge 2, The Revenge, Paranormal Activities, plural, it's a new franchise apparently, and the Johnny Buckspray movie. What do you want to see?
Right, I remember hearing something.
Mayo, are you listening?
Dude, what the fuck?
Look, I'll admit that was kind of funny, but are we still on this topic? It's there, it's annoying, but much like the incessant whinging over the peripheral NPC AI, the kind I keep seeing from the GTA fans, it's completely fucking inconsequential to the game. And you know it. Can we please move on?
So, Cyberpunk makes me hate the characters of this world, hate choosing dialogue options, and hate my own character. You end up in conversation after conversation of endless rambling from miserable pricks yelling at you for not talking fast enough, and you'll eventually just want to mash the F button to get to the end.
Yeah, if you have zero fucking attention span and want to play the game like an idiot, you might do that. Also, what do you have against V's voice actor? I thought he did a fine job. He sounds like someone who grew up in Night City and was hardened by it. I don't know, it just fits. What can I say? The voice just fits.
I got bored by the main story missions pretty fast, and decided to take the advice of many reviewers and fans and spend time in the side quests. That's apparently where the good stuff is. My first side mission had me sitting on a couch listening to a mother and other strangers at a funeral eulogizing a man that I didn't like. That was great.
Wow, I didn't actually get to play that mission yet, actually. But my friend did tell me a little bit about that mission, and what do you have against Jackie? Did he talk too much? Was there not enough shooty for you? It's glaringly obvious at this point that you don't give a shit about the story. And of course, leave you to cherry pick the worst example for the normies out there of what they can expect with the game. I know exactly why you picked this example. And you're doing this game a massive disservice and you know it. What about the questline with River Ward, where you have to infiltrate a club and find answers about a murder investigation? Or what about investigating an espionage on the future mayor of Night City and tracking down the perpetrators and discovering a very chilling plot that's not so different from your own character's predicament? And of course, let's never forget the Delamain plotline. That was hilarious and awesome, let's be honest. No, none of those missions you want to show. No, you don't want to show any of those missions. You want to show the dialogue-heavy funeral mission, where you just stand around, I'm guessing, because I haven't played it, for a character in a story you had no investment in because apparently there's too much dialogue for your taste, and you just want the characters to shut the fuck up so you can shoot, right?
Then I had to drive across town and pick up a thing from someone. Then I had to go pick up another thing. Then I had to go over here and shoot a couple guys.
Again, I'm gonna call bullshit because, for one, you haven't specified, and two, I don't think I've ever come across one fetch quest yet in my playthrough. Seriously. So I don't know what you're talking about. And the closest thing to a fetch quest that I've encountered anyway was the first half of the Delamain questline, because you had to drive all over the city to fetch his fragmented AI personalities, and personally that mission was great because it essentially allowed me to explore Night City, make some cash, and I actually looked forward to meeting each personality of Delamain because each was distinct and unique in its own way.
Then I had to get in a fist fight with two bald dudes using the terrible boxing combat.
It's not the best combat, but it's certainly not terrible, at least in my experience. My bigger issue is how the damage from the opposing fist fighter is dealt, which was fucking ridiculous. Granted, I didn't really level up my Street Brawler skill tree, but I'd find myself doing very little damage while they just kill me in 3 hits, even if their level was in the same bracket as mine. So the damage was kind of fucked up. The mechanics, however, I'd say are pretty solid. But also, the fist fighter questline is not what your audience was referring to when they were urging you to look for the side missions. Using that as as an example is incredibly disingenuous of you. This fist-fighting quest line was very much a side activity rather than a quest line. And this harkens back to, actually, The Witcher 3. Believe it or not, it was just a small activity you could take part in to earn some money. And yeah, there was a tiny bit of story in there in The Witcher 3, and it does somewhat progress a little bit, but it's nowhere near the meat of the side content that The Witcher 3 had to offer. Hell, in Cyberpunk, you can actually place bets for this guy's sniper rifle during one of the fight missions. And it's a pretty dope rifle, I'm not gonna lie. But anyone who played The Witcher 3, on the other hand, who uses the boxing side activities as an example for The Witcher 3's excellent range of side stories, would probably get punched in the face by other Witcher fans.
I never care about any mission that I'm completing. I pull up the list of side quests and I just think, man, I don't want to do any of these. Your phone rings and it says press T to answer the phone. I don't want to answer the phone. Too bad, the phone automatically answers for you and you have no choice. So why tell me to press T to answer the phone if I can't ignore it?
Yeah, you're the one who previously bitched about the game not being immersive enough, so cry me a fucking river. The same people cherry-picking why Cyberpunk isn't immersive will absolutely gloss over the substance it has. That does make it immersive. When a fixer calls you to let you know about a nearby job, that's exactly one of the aspects of the game that makes Cyberpunk's world feel alive.
I can't take this anymore. If you like this game, I'm happy for you. But I'm tired of this structure of game. Answer the phone, accept a mission, drive to this place, do the thing, report back, collect your reward. It's stale to me at this point. Cyberpunk feels like it's built on dated GTA open world design and I just can't get into it. And by the way, the characters in the old GTA games had oceans more charisma and personality than the miserable sacks of shit in Cyberpunk.
Well, here's where you're wrong. Good storytelling and side quests are never outdated. And Cyberpunk, like it or not, does it better than almost any other game. Certainly better than GTA 5. And not only that, but I could care less about the characters in GTA 5 or their supposed charisma because Cyberpunk is not GTA 5, just like it's not Doom Eternal. Sorry to break your heart, GTA 5 is essentially discount Los Angeles. People act and sound like they do in our own reality. Cyberpunk 2077 is set in a post-apocalyptic science fiction city that is a hostile, miserable place governed by a completely different structure and economy. So yes, the characters look and act differently. And you know what? Bugs and all, I'd still replay Cyberpunk again. Because it's vastly more interesting and fun to play than GTA 5. Which, speaking of GTA 5, I never touched that game again after finishing the main story because outside of that, back in 2012, when the game launched, there was bugger all to do. So take that, all the GTA snobs that were pointing the finger at Cyberpunk. I didn't even go back to play the fucking heists in GTA 5. I was over it by that point. Cyberpunk are probably going to do another 3 or 4 playthroughs. Now back to you, Mayo. If you don't like the way the game's world and characters act and feel, then again, this isn't the game for you. So quit talking shit about stuff you either don't understand, don't want to understand, and have a clear agenda against. I mean, you don't like it, so it has to be bad, right? You gotta grasp at straws at whatever you can. You wouldn't be the first. As a matter of fact, it feels like this video is catering to those very people.
There's cool stuff here in the art design and the skill trees and hacking abilities. I get it. I don't care about the bugs, they can fix the bugs, that's the least of the problems. So this isn't a review of the game. This is just a video answering the question of, hey Mayo, did you like Cyberpunk? No, I didn't. As I progressed through the game, certain aspects like the combat became more tolerable, but I can't say it became enjoyable. And for a game largely focused on story and dialogue, I find their implementation to be severely lacking. I enjoyed a couple missions where I took a stealth approach, mixing hacking abilities with quiet assassinations. That was alright, I guess. I won't be finishing this game, because I don't want to. I've honestly seen enough. I'm not gonna put another 40 hours into a game that I'm not enjoying.
But you knew you weren't going to enjoy it before you bought it, so why did you spend presumably 30 hours in the game and talked about a whole bunch of shit you didn't understand to get a video out about it in the first place? You should have just titled, Why I Don't Like Cyberpunk 2077. I mean, you still would have gotten stuff wrong, but as it stands, this video is a non-review that also half-assedly reviews the game and gets a whole bunch of shit wrong or just doesn't make much sense. Seriously guys. His video was titled, Why I Don't Like Cyberpunk 2077. I wouldn't have glanced at it twice. I would never have done this video. Truly. But that's not what this is. Again, it honestly feels like you were trying to jump on the wagon, Mayo, to appease the mob. But don't worry, you certainly haven't been the only one.
I'm sure there are cool things to discover later in the game, but at this point it's just not worth it. Thanks for watching. I know this video is probably a bit of a disappointment. I would like to have done an in-depth analysis of this game, but it's not something I like enough to study that deeply, and it's not something I hate enough to obsessively analyze. Like and subscribe and all that, and I'll see you in the next video. By the way, this company could be facing lawsuits very soon over their deceptive marketing of the quality of the console versions, especially since they only allowed reviewers to review the PC version and hid the disastrous state of the console game from the public. I hope something is done, and some heads deserve to roll.
Yeah, nobody denies that, but why did you mention that at the very end? It's kind of irrelevant to what the actual point of this video was. Feels like you just mentioned it at the end to try and appeal to the scorned player base, to garner some likes maybe? I don't know. Maybe he found that out while he was making this video and wanted to squeeze that in at the end. Anyway, look, we're just about done with his videos, so for now, here's some closing remarks. Under the Mayo, when he actually gives a shit, is very good at what he does. I find his takes, often than not, to be very unique from the majority of what I see on the internet, and I genuinely think he's a likable content creator. He's not the first person I've made a response to, and certainly won't be the last, and probably not even the last when it comes to Cyberpunk. Make no mistake, Cyberpunk 2077 is a fantastic game that's currently plagued with technical issues. There are certainly legitimate criticisms of the game itself. But lately what's been happening is because the developers of the game and the management of CD Projekt Red completely fucked the launch of the biggest game of the year, and possibly the most hyped game of all time, since then there has been a tremendous backlash of angry gamers slinging mud at the developers, which is mostly well deserved. But when it gets to the point where people actually praise Sony for taking Cyberpunk off their Play Store instead of acknowledging that it was CD Projekt Red who caused Sony to budge when they wouldn't for previous other worse launches, well, now it's gotten to the point where the backlash has become so overblown that people are getting facts straight wrong, and everyone wants to profit off it, so we start twisting everything into a negative, including misrepresenting facts around the controversy itself, and also the game itself. And you can certainly add Mayo's video to the list of moronic criticisms against Cyberpunk 2077 that was made simply to capitalize on the backlash, like so many others have. And like so many others, Mayo didn't have a real stake in this. He didn't want to make this video, but he made it anyway because he wanted to capitalize on what's possibly the biggest internet gaming controversy of the year. That's why he went ahead and made this video, just like all these people who are hopping on the train, catering to the masses of angry gamers, who certainly are justified in their anger. But this whole controversy has turned into one gigantic blur of nonsense, and it's difficult to try and find the line of legitimacy within the bullshit. Anyone who's played Cyberpunk knows this video of Mayo's wasn't very good, and also knows the game is being heavily misrepresented by the internet profiteers in light of this controversial launch. Anyone who's watching this back, I'd recommend you don't believe everything you hear and you should do your own research. And would I recommend Cyberpunk 2077? Absolutely, but only if you've got the hardware to run it. It certainly won't kill you to wait until CD Projekt Red releases its bigger patches in the coming months. So far, they've done a pretty good job of smoothing out the game on consoles, but there's still a lot of work to be done. So here's hoping we get more answers about not only the game's launch and what really happened there, but also on improving the game itself. Anyway, guys, that's going to be the end of the video. Thanks very much for tuning in. If you have some time, consider staying for the outro. First of all, in case you haven't figured it out yet, this is actually my second channel that talks about video games. If you're interested in movies, television, and pop culture related content, you can find me primarily on Anomaly Inc. I've linked my primary channel in the description, and I hope you check it out. You may find something to your liking. Secondly, don't forget to check out the channel's Discord server. It's a gaming dedicated Discord where we talk about Call of Duty, Halo, Doom, Nintendo, gaming news, Cyberpunk, and other stuff as well. Check it out at your leisure, and who knows, maybe you'll make some friends along the way. Next, I want to give a shout out and thank you to all of my patrons for all of their contributions and support for my work. You guys are awesome, and I really appreciate the generosity. If you'd like to become a patron and pledge to the channel, even if it's just $1 per month, the link to Patreon is in the description. Lastly, I want to give a shout out and thank you to my friend British Potato for helping me get this video out in a timely manner. He does response videos on his channel, and chances are he'll have plenty to say about Cyberpunk as well. He also made a response to Mayo, so give him a look. I've linked his channel below. Finally, here's one last thank you for staying to the end of the video. You are a legend, and I'll see you next time.